You're listening to episode 99 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Jennifer Howd joins us to speak about her book, Sit, Walk, Don't Talk: How I Survived a Silent Meditation Retreat. Going on retreat can be one of the most transformative, fun, interesting, and difficult things a meditator may do in their lifetime of contemplative practice. You encounter pain, continuous thoughts, overwhelming emotions, sometimes crushes or aversions to other participants, and sometimes moments of insight, or even sustained and enduring focus, clarity, and intimate contact with the dynamic process that is you. Jennifer Howd is a writer, editor, and a mindfulness facilitator certified by the Mindfulness Awareness Research Center at the University of California, Los Angeles. She offers mindfulness classes, workshops, retreats, and one-on-one mentoring for individuals and organizations seeking mindfulness-based tools for expanding awareness and fostering a greater sense of well-being. Our guest today is Jennifer Howd. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Ted.
So we're going to just dive right in about the subject at hand. Maybe that'll come out in you telling us a bit about your background and how you first encountered meditation.
Okay, well, I guess I didn't really start formally meditating until probably college. And I would say later in college, if not shortly thereafter. It was somewhere in the very early 20s. I had done a lot of reading about the subject, as most people tend to do before they actually dive in, or a lot of people do, I won't say most. And the philosophy always kind of really rang as true with a capital T for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always very drawn to it, to Eastern philosophy, to transcendentalism, all of that. I grew up in New England, so familiar with that movement. That was probably where it began. And then, yeah, life started happening, right?
Yeah.
And it got difficult. And reading about all of this philosophy wasn't the same as actually putting it to good use and putting it into practice. And so I vaguely remember trying to do it on my own after having read some things and that just not working at all. And so not sticking with it. And then I was living in New York City. I went to NYU and I was living in New York City for after I graduated, and my mom got sick with cancer. And that was like probably the first hugely big thing that I was dealing with that was challenging in my life. Mm-hmm. And I decided at that point that I needed some help. I did poke in and out of therapy at that point too, but I also started looking for meditation societies at that stage where I could practice in a group setting, maybe have a teacher. And so I remember, and I can't remember specifically which style of Buddhist meditation society I went to. I want to say it was probably Shambhala because there was quite a lot of pomp and circumstance. And I remember very specifically feeling at odds in the space. I didn't feel comfortable in it. I had a background of not really trusting organized religion for a variety of different reasons. And so it was not something that I ever had gravitated toward prior to this. And stepping into the meditation society space, even though I was considering Eastern philosophy a philosophy and not a religion, it still felt religious to me. And so I was like, yeah, no, I can't, I don't feel comfortable here. So I would leave. And it was really challenging for me because, as I said, the philosophy and everything that I was reading was like, yeah, absolutely. I had no doubt in my mind that this was truth for me. And yet I would step into these spaces, and Shambhala probably being one of them. I'm not sure what the other ones were. I know they weren't Zen. I didn't try Zen, but each one had its own kind of, I wasn't comfortable in the context, right? So I would try it. I would be there, maybe like 1 or 2 sessions, and then be like, nope, I'm out of here. And this would happen, over the course of maybe probably 5 years, in and out and in and out and in and out. Then eventually, I ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I was in a very toxic relationship that was abusive at times, and everything kind of fell apart completely, like when we moved here. And I was left in that moment recognizing that, how did I get here? And having this very clear innate sense that it was because I wasn't paying attention to my life, and that I needed to one, start paying attention to my life. And I also needed to find whatever my version of faith was. I needed trust in something larger than self. I needed something, because if I didn't find that, I might not be around for much longer. It was really quite at that point. And so once again, I, went in and out of different Buddhist meditation societies in LA, Shambhala being one of them. Against the Stream, which is an insight meditation society, was another one. And that was the one where I was like, oh, wait a minute, this feels a little bit different. Now, for those listeners who aren't familiar with Against the Stream, Noah Levine is the founder, and he is basically like tattooed from head to toe, like total kind of rocker, rebel looking guy. Very
listeners
opposite.
To my other podcast will be familiar with Noah.
Okay, yeah. Very opposite of what the stereotypical kind of, meditator looks like, right? And so walking into the society, I went to the Melrose location. It was a bunch of like rock and roll people that were tattooed, and I have a couple of tattoos, and I'd like to think that I'm a bit of a rock and roller, but I'm probably not as much as I'd like to think I am. but I felt a bit more at ease in that environment. And so I was able to, at that point, look past all the Buddha and all the Buddha talk, right? And just be in the space to the extent where I was comfortable enough to actually get a practice off the ground. So I went, I think, weekly to their like Sunday set or something at first. And then after a couple of weeks of that, I remember leaving one day and I saw a flyer for UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. And it said that it was secular mindfulness. And I didn't even know what secular meant. But I was like, this is UCLA. And that to me appeals to my Western kind of intellectual sensibility and, immediate kind of safety in that for me. And so I was like, let me check this out. And so I went. And I will say, like, the proverbial bells, went off, and like, oh, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. They stripped out all the stuff that I felt really uncomfortable with. They put it into a context that I felt really safe. They put science in there, again, feeling some certain amount of safety in science, although we can certainly, talk about that too. But at that point, I was just like, yeah, this is an environment where I feel like I can dive into this material finally. And so I did. I just went in, and I didn't stop. I haven't stopped since. That was like 2010, 2011, and it's been amazing.
Jennifer, there's so many things that came up for me as you were describing this, because just today And for the past couple of weeks, actually, but especially today, so many of the things that you brought up about your experiences are reflected in the experiences of many other people who are perhaps of a particular cultural context, where being in a Buddhist center that has a particular way of expressing the Dharma don't quite fit with us because of just how we are. You know, I also am more inclined towards the science side of things, and a little less towards ritual. And I think it's really important to note, and this came up in these conversations, that there's, I would suggest, a false impression that those of us who are inclined that way in our expression of practice, one might call it Dharma, one might not. To me, it's part of our human experience. Doesn't mean that there's a disregard or a dislike of the other practices. For others, that's fine. It's simply not resonating with us. I'm not from India of 2,500 years ago, nor am I Sri Lankan, even though I loved sitting with my Sri Lankan teachers in that community in Minneapolis. It's still my whole upbringing and context and way of viewing the world is different. And so it was so interesting to hear you say that, because all of this stuff is coming up in conversations more and more, and it's not a matter of disrespect or considering one way of doing it superior to another. It's just other manifestations of how we engage with this practice. So thank you so much for that very rich description.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, absolutely. It's just different. It's just to each their own, right? And you know, I do consider myself a highly individualistic person, and that can be really challenging at times to find community around. And you know, that's probably a whole other discussion too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The interview just yesterday that I was recording, we just briefly touched on being, not really liking being told what to do, and being more individualistic, and that can make it difficult for us in some ways in finding community where there may be a little more encouragement to do things a certain way that quite fit with us. Yeah. So with that practice that was growing, and you haven't stopped, you've been going strong. Then you get to a point where, a retreat seems like a good idea at the time. What made you decide to go on your first retreat?
Actually, it was UCLA. So I started taking the classes, as I mentioned, when I found them. I was taking their MAPS classes, individual kind of like 4-week or 8-week classes. I can't remember now. And at the time, I was like, I took so well to it, and it was making such a huge difference in the quality of my being, that I was like, okay, this is clearly going to be something that I do for the rest of my life. And what can I do to step deeper into this? And I had read about their certification program, their mindful certification facilitation program. Mm-hmm. And so I applied to it, just kind of like, let me apply to this. And Diana Winston, who heads the program, got back to me. She actually called me, and she's like, you're a very sincere practitioner, and I think that this would be a great track for you. You just don't necessarily have enough on your meditation resume, so to speak, to be a part of this program. And there are several other people who have applied who are kind of in similar places. And so we're going to create a intensive practice program, which would be kind of an interim step between just like a 4 to 8 week class and stepping into the certification program. It'll be a year-long program. And is this something of interest to you? It'll be a pilot thing, and we're going to just test it out to see if it works. I was like, yes, sign me up. So one of the requirements of that program was to go on a 5-day or longer retreat. And so I ended up going my first retreat, which actually is this book that I wrote, Sit, Walk, Don't Talk, How I Survived a Silent Meditation Retreat, is actually about my second retreat. Okay. My first retreat was a 5-day at Spirit Rock, the Labor Day retreat. That was really the reason that I went, to be honest with you. It's because I kind of had to.
It's a requirement.
Yeah, it was a requirement.
So tell us about your second retreat then. And 'cause that's where things sounds like they got more interesting.
They got a little gnarly, actually. Yeah. So the second retreat was a 9-day retreat, also given by Spirit Rock, but actually taking place at Joshua Tree Retreat Center. So I went, and the first morning I woke up, spoiler alert for those who haven't read the book yet, but I woke up with what ended up being strep throat.
Mm.
And so having also not knowing that much still, because it was only my second retreat, about protocol and how they all worked and all this stuff, like I didn't even honestly think that I had an option to go to the doctor or that I could get medicine, or like I didn't even know. I was just like, oh, am I allowed to swear on this thing?
Yes, we can add a tag.
Oh, shit. I'm in trouble. I have to sit with this pain. For those of you listening who know what strep throat feels like, it's kind of like swallowing shards of glass, basically.
Yeah.
Swallow. And I'm like, okay, I have to sit with this for 9 days straight. Are you kidding me? So, that's what I woke up to the first morning. And you can say that my mind was reeling, and I had lots of thoughts that were just really challenging, to say the least, that I was managing throughout this whole process. And yeah, I learned a lot about how to sit with pain.
So what a wonderful start to a 9-day with strep. I want to kind of dive into some of the other aspects of the retreat itself. One of which is what were some of the strange things that you found about it? And it's okay to include stuff from your first retreat as well. What were some of those? Well, that's kind of different. What was that?
Well, I mean, obviously, not talking to people that you're around 24/7 is an interesting, and some might say strange, experience. Personally, I am an introvert, so it was kind of heaven to me. However, those who are extroverts might consider it quite the opposite and can be just really uncomfortable and unhappy in that space. To me, I was like, okay, this is a little weird, but I'm digging it. I'm all in. The other element of not communicating with other people, and this is generally described in the beginning of the retreats, is that you're not communicating non-verbally either, meaning there's no eye contact, there's no hand gesturing. You are in your own space, and that is it. And so that can be really weird and very challenging for some people too, to kind of get over that social conditioning that we have, and to really embrace the container of the space. And I really did embrace it, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. That's probably the strangest part of the experience, is the navigating the awkwardness, any awkwardness one might have around, not acknowledging other people who are right there in front of you and with you.
It was very hard. In my own experience, in my first Zen retreat, it was just an afternoon thing, and you're walking in. It's one room. It's fairly small, and you're pretty close to folks, and not just a hello with eyes can be difficult that first time. And that makes me wonder what you might have found difficult about the first and the second retreats. What were the things that were a little harder for you?
Oh, for sure. I had no idea how physically demanding it would be, because, you think, oh, I'm just going to be sitting down for 10 hours a day or whatever. Oh my goodness. The back pain, the back pain. I don't know what else to say other than the back pain, exclamation point. It's there. At least it was there for me. And I understand that this is a pretty common experience for other people too. But, when you're sitting on the cushion for extended amounts of time like that, you're using muscles that you just don't normally use when you use chairs all the time. And it can be pretty gnarly. the first couple of days, especially when your body's adjusting to this schedule, can be really challenging. Some people do find the waking up really early in the morning challenging. For some reason, I guess I'm a morning person. It wasn't so bad for me, but retreats do typically start very early, 4, 4:30, 5 a.m., usually somewhere around there is when you get the first wake up bell. And so that can be challenging for some folks. But yeah, honestly, I think the physical part of it was and still is for me, and I've been on about 7 retreats now, the most challenging part.
In any of the retreats you've been to, I'm curious if there was an acceptance of being able to stand. If you have a particular physical need or pain, I know in Theravada tradition, it was like heaven in contrast to Zen, where you're sitting for 40 minutes, you're walking for 10, you're sitting for 40, being in a different environment where, so we're going to be here for the next hour and a half, stand when you need to, do walking mindfully when you need to. That's you're in charge of your own experience with that. And when you notice discomfort, it doesn't mean you have to itch or scratch or move right away. Lean into that and get to know it a bit and move when you do need to with awareness. I'm wondering what it was like for you. Was there the ability for you to stand when you needed to?
Yeah, that's a good point too. Just to put it out there that there are a lot of different types of retreats, right? You're mentioning Zen. I specifically have only been on Vipassana or Insight meditation retreats. That said, I've never been on an SN Goenka Vipassana retreat. And there is a distinction between going to Spirit Rock and going to an SN Goenka retreat. The biggest distinction from what I understand, again, having not been on an SN Goenka retreat, is that the SN Goenka retreats are incredibly strict about what you can and cannot do. And I wouldn't be surprised, and maybe some of your listeners know and can give us some feedback about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't let you stand in an SN Goenka retreat. Whereas, on a Spirit Rock or IMS or something, another, kind of more lenient place where there are teachers, the teachers will generally tell the students exactly what you just said. Okay, yes, if there's some form of being uncomfortable, you don't necessarily want to move right away. You want to see if you can work with it. But if you're at a place where it's excruciating or there's really some sort of damage being done, by all means, stand up or, find a chair and meditate in the back of the space. Or in some cases, you can lie down as well. On the first retreat that I went to, the 5-day, it was a big struggle for me trying to discern whether or not I should sit in a chair.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I was struggling with that decision of like, should I sit in a chair? I'm in so much pain, but like, should I? And I remember asking, because there are opportunities, again, in some retreats, offer opportunities to talk with meditation teachers in small groups and sometimes one-on-one. And I remember asking in my small group, is it okay? And they didn't really answer. They really wanted me to decide, whether or not it was okay. They certainly said that it wasn't forbidden, but they weren't necessarily giving me permission to just take a nap in the back either. So there's always that middle ground that we have to find, in this practice in life and everywhere we go, including on retreat. Like, where is the edge? Can I move a little bit past my edge? And then at what point do I say, okay, this is unkind to myself and not compassionate? What is the more compassionate thing that I can do while still stretching?
And, honoring the integrity of whatever that is, that we're not doing this as a spiritual bypassing. We are engaging with what is difficult too. We're also not torturing ourselves. I'll mention, I think it might be helpful. I'll post a link to an article that a friend just wrote about her first retreat, which was a Goenka style. She had some interesting things to share with that. So I also wanted to ask, what did you like best about this?
Well, as you said, that the food pops up first, which I'm noticing some judgment that I have about myself in saying that. But yeah, usually the food is pretty awesome. It's vegetarian, and I am not a vegetarian, although I don't eat red meat, so it's not too big of a stretch for me to go vegetarian for a week or so. And there's usually just amazing curries and just things that I never eat, and organic and fresh and just delicious. So the food is usually pretty awesome. I will say I was on one retreat. I won't say where, but the food was not good, and it kind of was a bummer because it's like the one thing you look forward to when you're on retreat, because it's kind of the one thing that's actually potentially pleasurable. But yeah, so food generally is up there for me. Also, I do, as I mentioned, enjoy not talking. I enjoy being completely in my own experience. That to me is something that I look forward to. And then, just the opportunity to go deep in a way that my everyday practice doesn't bring me. And the insights that come from that, they're just, beyond profound. And that's why I keep going. I started going on retreat because it was a requirement. I continue to go because I grow so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you skipped to an additional question I was going to ask, which is what has been the most helpful benefit to you in going to these? And that's one of them. I'm wondering if there's anything else that you're noticing manifesting in your life.
Yeah, the insights. They've just been innumerable. I share some of them in my book, but every time I have not been on a retreat where I haven't had at least one significant insight into the nature of my own being and the way that I tick that hasn't, in some really large way, ended up enhancing my life.
So if there was, and bearing in mind, you may mention this in the book as well, if there's some advice you might give someone who's maybe not gone on retreat and they're thinking about it, what would you say?
They're thinking about going on retreat.
Yeah.
Well, I have an appendix section in this book. So the book is mostly memoir, but there's a little section in the back that has several different small appendices. And 12 Tips to Help You Survive a Silent Meditation Retreat is the first one. And there are some tips in there that I think would be helpful for folks who are considering it. We talked a little bit about making sure that you know kind of what you're getting into in terms of the actual retreat center, that there are different styles, and they're all going to offer different experiences. And so doing a bit of research, there's usually an FAQ of some sort that's involved, taking a look at that, talking to other practitioners in the style that you practice, and seeing if they have teachers or locations that they recommend. Just doing research, I think, is generally a really good idea. And your gut will most likely tell you like which ones are not a good fit, and then help you kind of narrow down the ones that might be. I think one of the most important things, especially now, there've been some articles lately about people not having very good experiences at retreats, and I really can't emphasize enough being aware of why not attending might be a good idea for you. If you have some sort of history of PTSD, any major anxiety or depression or mental illness of some sort, check with your mental health professional, talk to them about the idea of going on retreat and whether or not it's something that would be beneficial or in some cases not beneficial for you to attend. Talking to some meditation teachers also can be really helpful in trying to discern whether or not it's something that is for you. And again, if you are dealing with some depression or anxiety or more mitigated levels of mental illness, and it is something that you want to try, going back to the first tip of really being clear about what you're stepping into, because again, I believe the Goenka retreats don't actually have meditation teachers on site. I believe you're dealing with TAs, or people who are not necessarily trained in the same way that a meditation teacher is. And so, they can be really valuable people to help you through difficult challenges, to have them available to support your experience. And if you are left on your own, yes, that's going to give you a different experience and it's going to be valuable in a different way. But if, again, we're dealing with, some sort of mental illness or some sort of psychotic break or something like that, I think it's important that that we're supported in that. And so places like Spirit Rock, IMS in Massachusetts, they have teachers who often have not only meditation experience, but are also, PhDs and psychotherapists and all of that. So they have even more expansive knowledge to be able to support your experience. But I think those are probably kind of two big ones as you step into deciding whether or not this is something that you want to do.
Jennifer, thank you for bringing that up, because it's, as we've said here and elsewhere many times, that meditation is not a cure-all. It's not for everyone. And that it might not be right for you at this time doesn't mean it might not be at some other point. But it's very important to just check in with yourself. How are you doing? Because your well-being is paramount, and to take care of yourself. And even just dipping your toe in the water, let alone a full-blown retreat, it may be that things you're not aware of may come up. And if it gets into territory that is overwhelming, that's not where you want to be. And to just take care of yourself. Be safe, have fun, retreat experience.
Yeah. And, one thing that I say all the time to the folks that I work with as a mindfulness facilitator is that meditation is not all rainbows and unicorns. Right. We see it in the media portrayed that way quite often, with the blissed out person, sitting on the rock by the water. And yeah, sure, that's a part of the experience, but it is not the entirety of it. And it's so important that people know that going in, especially on a retreat. Because yes, I have had a retreat or two that has been really blissed out for the majority of it. But of the 7 retreats that I've had, the majority of them, there's a lot of gnarly shit that I'm dealing with. And that is the work. That's where you're going deep. That's where you're cleaning out the pipes. You're getting, you're getting in there and you're stirring up the stuff that just is normally so pushed down, and you're giving it space to come up, and it's going to be boom right there in your face. And chances are it's going to be challenging. So it's not a spa, experience. Going on retreat is not going to be this like, oh yes, it's this blissful, silence away from my family, and I can go swimming. No, that's not going to be that. Right. Not at least the kind that we're talking about.
Thank you. So folks who are listening to the podcast, if you want to find out more, you can check out more of Jennifer's work at jenniferhowd.com. And I'll be linking that on the episode page along with her book that we've been chatting about today, Sit, Walk, Don't Talk, How I Survived a Silent Meditation Retreat. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Ted. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.